I have had experiences with the paranormal going back since I was 4 years old, and that includes UFO sightings as well. And before I got the digital camera to record the phenomena, one um, sighting in particular proved to be very significant in my life. I was 12, and it was, I left my friend's house at 6:25, and I was meant to be home at 6:30, which the distance from her place to my parents' home was less than 3 minutes walk. Anyway, I looked up and I saw this object hovering above me, and next thing I know, I got into my parents' home, and about three and a half hours had gone past. But the thing is, and this is where the skeptic, I've got the videotape here of the regression, this is where the skeptic will come unstuck, is when I was taking it. Now, I was 12 years old, and under regression in 1993, I told of the events that occurred in 2001, namely 9/11. I described the towers, and I've described the airplanes and mentioned bombs. If I could find someone reliable and trustworthy, if I can find where my husband's put the tape, someone who I can rely on, trustworthy, and so to know that the original VHS tape wouldn't go missing, I would love to convert it to DVD and hope, because while it was being recorded as well, the Tony Dodd, who was investigating me, he couldn't understand why, when I was regressed, his camera, which was a perfectly good camera, new, was suddenly, especially as I was going, under regression, while I was going over what occurred during the times I was contacted, as it were, or taken, abducted, whatever your perception of the phenomena is. The video camera, there was a lot hissing coming over, but you can still hear me describe the events of 9/11. And I even said that I would be in my late 30s and I wouldn't be able to stop it. And as it turned out, I was 38 when 9/11 had occurred. And about, I think it must have been a week or 2 weeks before the incident, I did contact Tony, because I had this overwhelming sense of impending doom. I knew something really enormous was about to happen. I could feel it, at which there's a lot more to that particular experience when I was 12, connecting with 9/11. That's really hard to go into because it relates to the time-space continuum thing, and it's just too perplexing for me to go into. But if you're interested, I'd be more than willing to share it with you. It's just basically, for 26 years, since the age of 12, I carried the burden of those 3,000 people for 26 years of my life. And when I saw it for real, when you see something that you've been carrying around for you for 26 years suddenly become real in front of you, you're not sure if it's something that's, it's sort of hard to explain it, because when I told my husband where the second plane was going to hit, I had already thought that it had already happened, because I had seen it, don't forget, all those years. So when I showed him where on the building, I thought that it was already being replayed, but my husband said no. I had actually told him where the plane was going to hit before it hit, and I told him that there was a second plane before anyone ever knew a second plane was going to come. And it's sort of hard to explain, except for the fact that when I was taken at 12, I had been given the events of 9/11, but you got to remember I was 12 years old. I knew that the city that I was shown was familiar to me, but I, the the only one I could relate it to at the time, because I've never been to New York, and I've never really seen any real footage. When my parents, because I'm British, my parents went to the States because my dad got transferred to the States because he was in the military. I went, obviously we flew over the Statue of Liberty and that, but being so little, I don't remember it, and don't recall seeing it. So, and I don't think the Twin Towers were there. So basically, the location was totally unfamiliar to me, but yet familiar. And the only closest place I could relate it to was Hong Kong. I knew the landscape was very similar to Hong Kong, but I kept thinking that the towers were bigger than they were in the pictures I saw of Hong Kong. And when my husband turned the television over, then suddenly the images, everything came back to me just, in clarity. And then I realized that why I said in the regression tape that the place was familiar was because it was there in America, and I had lived over there. Obviously I was familiar with New York, but I wasn't really familiar with how it looked from what the perspective I was shown it when I was 12, because all I really was shown was the towers before they were hit and after they were hit. But I assumed, this is where the time and space continuum might get a bit tricky for some, I assumed that when they showed me on this screen, they were showing me like recordings of events, because it had little symbols on the bottom. Now I'm beginning to wonder if actually what they were doing, those symbols were actually dates, and they had actually transported me into the future, taken me to the place where the incident was going to happen, and then took me to the place where it did happen, and showed them to me, whereas where I was in the ship and looking at the only way to describe it is like the whole wall of the craft, one wall, had become like a cinema screen, for lack of a better description. And, when you looked at it, it was like looking, at a movie. So I naturally being 12 and having gone to theater, that's what I assumed it was. I was looking at movies. They didn't tell me what I was looking at. They didn't tell me I was going back and forth through time. They just told me to watch and to remember. And the only reason I'm sharing this with you, and I'm starting to come out in the open about this, is I am hoping to, when I can find up the videotape, which I know where it is, my husband moved it, I know roughly where it is. When I find it, as if someone, because we had some visitors today, they got into the spare room. Now whether they came looking for it, I don't know. But anyway, I don't think they found it. Anyway, I would like to find someone I can trust to put it onto DVD, transfer it from VHS to DVD, and then I would like to be able to share the actual regression with everyone, so they can see for themselves something that will make the skeptic in this particular video clip look pretty foolish, and that would be the proof that a lot of these skeptics need. So, ask yourself this: how does a 12-year-old know about events that happens 26 years in the future? And it was 1993 when the regression video was done, so, how could that be? Unless of course some involvement with time-space was involved.